when we dirty up our ideals, our morals with our fantasies, we get this sort of separation. The way we believe people should act while we completely reinforce a different way of acting. Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe, and I'm here to continue a conversation we were having just a couple weeks ago now. The masculinity, toxic masculinity equation. And, you know, I was thinking when I was preparing this episode about junior high. I don't know if any of you had this experience, but there was this guy in my junior high who was, like, without question, the coolest guy in our grade. You know, we're 13, 14. This guy surfed. He looked amazing. He didn't care let me fix that. I'm going to start again. He surfed. He looked great. He didn't care about anybody else and made sure that you knew that because he was making fun of almost everybody all the time. And he dated the two most popular girls in the class. And this is like 8th grade. Who does that? Who dates the two hottest, most popular girls in the class? That guy did. I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes where I tell that story of the girl that I asked out and was wholly embarrassed, and all her friends made fun of me for weeks and weeks, and that made me not ask another girl out for many, many years. Well, that girl was one of his two girlfriends. This guy, at the age of 13 or 14, he had something that none of the rest of us had. He had friends close to him that got a little bit out of it, but he was the alpha, and everybody knew it. And the rest of us, we wouldn't even qualify as betas or like gammas. Maybe we were deltas, right? We were like the D list compared to this guy. And I know for myself, I fit in that framework, like maybe a gamma, probably a delta, right? Like 3 layers below the popularity and the like charisma this guy had. There was something, how do you say it now? Something extra about him. Now, I have absolutely no idea where this guy is right now, but I wanted to start out this way because, you know, I want to remind you of that masculinity episode that we recorded a couple weeks ago, and this guy was the peak. He was the top. He was the Dwayne Johnson of our grade. He was the man. He looked like the man. He got the girls like the man is supposed to. He was it. We all wanted to be like him. Now, I don't actually know if he ever mistreated a woman, right? I left Israel when I was 13 and some. I don't know if anything bad ever happened, but for all I know, he never had to because all the girls wanted him. But guys like him, these exact guys, are the thing that a lot of men aspire to. I'm not going to say all men, but a lot of men aspire to be like that. And a lot of us fall short of that fantasy version of manhood, right? Like they're the alpha and there aren't a lot of them like it. And by alpha, I mean like he didn't come from an incredibly rich family, but they were doing okay. So like on all fronts, he had it. And we didn't. And the thing is that it never feels good to fall short. Now, the way I want to connect this to the toxic masculinity conversation is everybody keeps looking for the most obvious examples of toxic masculinity, right? The Harvey Weinsteins, the Donald Trumps, now the Jeffrey Epsteins, and the people like them. But like I said last time, I see this whole problem as a manifestation of a much deeper issue. And I'm going to dig into it by, first of all, revisiting what I discussed last time as kind of the typical male roles as we define them by our culture. And then what happens to the 95% or so of men who just don't match up to those ideals. And lastly, what are the consequences when you don't match up and yet all of society tells you that you're supposed to, what are the effects of that? So let's just start out with typical male roles, right? Like we talked last time about the porn, the fantasy culture. So many of us learn about sex from these stories, these fantastical, completely irrelevant to reality stories where, the mailman comes by in a porn. I'm making this story up, by the way, but like comes by and delivers some mail, and the woman has a package for him. So she asks him if he can come in and get the package. And next thing you know, she and 3 of her friends are having sex with him on the kitchen table. That is probably literally the plot of a porn. Or like, here's one from literally a porn that I watched when I was a little kid, like 11 or 12, right? This guy, this businessman comes home, puts on his briefcase, and his wife greets him with like this see-through negligee, and she's really sexy, and she brings him a drink, and then he sits down, and one of his business partners comes in. He makes a call, and the business partner comes in and visits, and they talk, and then he calls his wife, and his wife brings the other guy a drink, and she's half naked, and they start fooling around with her. Some other, like the maid joins at some point in like an orgy in their living room. Like these are the stories that kids like me, boys like me, grew up with as the ideal. Oh, so one day I'll be a businessman and my wife will have sex with me and whoever else I wanted to have while bringing me drinks. Like this is the fantasy, right? That's why I said last time, like these fantasies are not that different than Iron Man. Oh, I will one day wear and create a suit that would allow me to fly and throw fireballs at people. Like it's insane how fantastical it is, but nobody ever talks about it. So you don't even really know how fantastical it really is. And the thing is, like we talk about in Ignited so much, what you believe is what you live. And so you see the world through those lenses and you grow up. And then in the rest of society, we keep being told that men are these conquerors, right? We have to conquer to survive. That's what we do. We hunt and we conquer. And when we come from these traditional kind of alpha-oriented cultures where we really look up to the alpha, like in the animal kingdom, it actually goes even a step further than to fit in, you should conquer, to be the man that everybody wants you to be. From a really basic standpoint, you kind of have to conquer to survive. If you think about it, alpha males in primate culture and like in other species, they're the ones who propagate their genes the most. They have sex with the most women. They get the pick. They have the most babies, which means their genes will likely survive more than others. So literally, you have to conquer. You have to become like the alpha to survive. And what goes along with that is you never show vulnerability and pain because the alphas don't. The alphas would rather kill you than let you get near their dominion, their home. And so you can never show that you're weak because life is this competition and the alpha wins. And if you show weakness, you'll be killed. If you think of sports, if you think of, especially things like football and some of these sports that we're really into, boxing, right? This is the ideal. The ideal is I am stronger than you. I'm so much stronger than you. I'll show you how I can demolish you. And that's the typical male role. Now, a small number of people actually fit into that area of life. They actually fit that mold. They actually live upholding those principles because it comes naturally to them. The other 95% who are not like that kid that I grew up with, they're never going to get close to this. I'm putting myself in this arena, right? In this group, like I like succeeding. I like winning. I'm a competitive guy. I like doing well. But I'm not cutthroat in that way. My mentality is not kill or be killed, right? My mentality is not, I must destroy, I must conquer. And growing up, you kind of measure how manly you are by whether you fit that stereotype, whether you look like those guys do, whether you act the way they do, like you engage in the sports that they do. Skateboarding was big. Surfing was big when I was growing up, right? How many girls you can get. That's kind of how you measure for that guy too. How much bullying you do for other people. How much fun you make of everybody else. And so we all start measuring ourselves by these ideals that we placed as ideals because guess what? We don't live in a world anymore where that alpha aggression and violence will necessarily win out unless we start measuring ourselves by that, but we fall into that trap. We start comparing ourselves to those guys, and if we don't measure up, we feel badly about ourselves. And if you continue to measure yourself that way, and by the way, again, we live in a society that tells you that you should, you're just going to feel less manly. And as a man, whether you're straight or gay, by the way, oftentimes from the conversations I've had with a lot of guys, if you feel less manly, you're going to feel shame. And if you feel that shame, and you know my stance on shame, you're going to have to deal with that shame some way, somehow. And there are a few options that I came up with, and one of them is you can change who you are to get closer to that ideal. Go to the gym, pump iron, work out all the time, play the hard sports, do whatever you feel you need to do to get yourself closer to that place. Another option is you'll find other people or other groups to control so you can deflect the shame. Because if you shame them, if you make them feel like less than, you get to feel superior, which will fix, at least temporarily, some of that shame that you feel. For some people, I fit into this category a little bit. I take on the opposing self-identity. Like, fuck them, I don't need to be like them, I will be the opposite. There's that allegory of a fox who walks by a tree and he sees a bird's nest and there's little birds and he wants to get them, their prey, right? He wants to eat them, so he tries to jump up and they're kind of teasing him because it's too high, and he tries again and again and again. And in the fifth or sixth try, he just can't do it, and so he walks away and he goes, yeah, that type of bird, it's really tough meat. They're not good to eat. He deflects his inability to get the prey by saying that prey is no good. And so I did that. I distanced myself as much as I could from stereotypical kind of male role models and said, I don't care about those. Those guys are losers. I need to be opposite. The weird thing is you still let those guys control what you do because all you want to be is their opposite. And then there's option D, the last one. And this one sucks. You feel so much shame about being less of a man that you fall into this endless pit of despair of your own because you feel like a loser. And you feel like you're never going to measure up. And so you'll never get out of being a loser. And you live in that space. Now, we've talked about shame before, but there are consequences of feeling that inadequate and having to prove yourself all the time. Like, I remember, again, right? If you think about what I did when I called and tried to ask out one of his girlfriends, I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to elevate my status, and it backfired immensely, right? It backfired by actually making me a laughingstock of all the kids in the school, at least from my perception. And shame, it makes people react. And oftentimes, shame makes people react in really negative ways that either hurt themselves or other people, just to kind of compensate or completely numb out the pain that you feel because of it. And I think that that's because shame is just one of the most negative and psychologically painful emotions that we can feel. Because it brings up so much fear. It brings up fear of rejection, of abandonment, of survival, right? Because if nobody will be with me, if I'm less than, if nobody will take me in and nobody will connect with me, I might not survive. In olden times, that was the role of shame, was to keep people in line, because within the tribe, everybody had to play their role. And if you didn't, it reduced the probability of survival for everybody. So for men who feel less than, controlling women, pushing past the boundaries of women, even assaulting and raping women, is a completely misguided and terrible and ridiculous way for a man who feels less than to prove that he's really man enough. And this is why they say rape is not about sex. It's about sex in terms of the act, but it's not about sex because it's really about proving you're man enough. It's about taking control over somebody. And because you don't feel like you can take control over those men that you want to be like, which is the real dream, to become alpha, then what you do is you take control over somebody else who you believe you can't control and create fear in, so you are dominant. So many of the stories that we heard in the associated fallout of the whole Weinstein revelations can fall into that category. Just listen to the stories, right? Guys who exposed themselves, made other people go be in the shower room, kind of in the bathroom with them while they're showering or naked. It's this way to say to somebody, I have control over you. You can't do anything in this place. These are internally uncomfortable men who always felt like they had to prove themselves. And then they make it in a career that gives them the money and the power, and therefore they feel like they can live out their boyhood fantasy and show everybody in the world how really manly they are and how in control they really are. So just to recap, our typical male roles create this fantasy that 95% of men or so just do not match, of being this alpha guy who can do everything. And not matching that creates consequences of feeling inadequate and shame. And then guys act out on that shame to try to prove that they really are manly enough. The point of it is this: if what we do is just keep looking for the evil men who do these things, we're going to miss the opportunity to address the actual issue. The forces that are driving these men, and many of them who haven't been exposed yet, to act in these ways. Because the issue is that if we don't address these deeper issues, we'll continue facing these problems for many, many years to come. I was reading articles by other men, older men, 50s, 60s, who were saying, what you're calling toxic masculinity is how I grew up. Now I'm 42 and it's still pretty much how I grew up. So that means there's millions of us. Think about Harvey Weinstein. He was too big, too overweight, too awkward, too obnoxious for women to just regularly find him appealing. My guess is, I don't know this about Harvey, but my guess is he was bullied and made fun of his whole life growing up. So he made so much money that he felt like it put him on par with the kind of men that he adored and wanted to be like as a kid. And it worked. He got the women. And that's the thing. Everybody else around him supported the fantasy, which is why I was able to carry around for so long, right? Because everybody else went along with the plan, because that's the social belief, the understanding of who these men are. In our supposed ideal world, when opportunities came up early in Harvey's production career to get favor with women because of his standing, Harvey was supposed to have said, hey, look, I'm the producer of this movie, the show, the short, whatever, but I don't get involved with casting. You got to go talk to the casting people. Anytime women try to get close to him for the influence, he was supposed to separate himself from the situation and maintain a really clear, distinct line between his professional role and the personal connection he had with these women. They were free to date him if they wanted to, but not for favors, because once the favors came in, that's when the power came. But here's the thing. He was rich and powerful, and as that, from the male standpoint, he saw himself as like being gifted with the power to get anything that he wanted because he had something so many of these women wanted. He had many of these things these women wanted, right? He had the power and the prestige and the connection and the money. And that's what happens, guys. When we dirty up our ideals, our morals with our fantasies, we get this sort of separation. The way we believe people should act while we completely reinforce a different way of acting. If you think about it, until he was destroyed, for the vast majority of people, Harvey kind of created a sort of ideal for a lot of men on his own. Even gruffy, overweight, and unattractive men can have anything they want if they become powerful enough. Just think about that. And think about whether that's true where you are, in your environment, even though you think it shouldn't be. Okay, so when I was preparing for recording this, I looked up the guy from my junior high, and he is still living the exact same life, at least from what it looks like from Facebook. His profile picture is actually him with a surfboard, and he has a six-pack that I would literally need to pay someone money to get. And half of his pictures are him partying at Israeli clubs and hotspots with really amazing-looking women. The only difference between now and then is in how I relate to seeing his profile. Because now, instead of wanting to be like him, I appreciate my own life so much, I just wish him the best living his. Why? Because I don't hold the same shame about fitting into this male hierarchy anymore, or the same standards of what it means for me to be a man that I was holding back then. My life is amazing exactly like it is, and I don't need, and actually kind of don't want, his life to be happy. I don't know if he has kids. I don't see kids in there. I love my kids more than anything, right? There's things in my life. I'm married to an amazing woman. I don't know if he's married. I didn't look deeply enough into that, but I don't need to compare how he's doing to my life, and that's beautiful. So here's the takeaway for us. Yes, let's hold the people who are acting inappropriately now accountable for the assaults and the rapes and the misuse of power that they took on in their quest to prove their manhood, and use every aspect of their power that they believe they were entitled to. Because listen, no amount of money or influence gives you dominion over other people, ever. But let's not, even for a split second, fool ourselves into thinking that these people are somehow different or more toxic or abnormal. This thing is masculinity as we teach it. Those guys just reached the top of it. And until we change the rules of the game, I'm sorry to say it, but we're going to be dealing with pussy grabbing, whether it's caught on a recording or not, and we can be mad about it, or we can change the game. I'm all for changing the game. So do me a favor, if any of this resonated with you, share it with other people that you think it might make a difference in, because we've got to make this a movement. It doesn't matter unless it becomes bigger than just any one of us. Share this with us. Tag me, tag Ignited. Tell me what you like, what you didn't like. Give us a review if you like this a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to continue this conversation. See you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you. So please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.